when they built it, they put in the street plan, esoteric symbols, astrological symbols, and classic symbols like pentagrams and what we call Stars of David. And there you see a Star of David in the street plan of Washington. There's the Capitol building down the bottom. But it's not a Star of David, funnily enough. It's nothing to do with the Jewish race, the Jewish people. When you look back into the ancient world, this symbol can be found all over the place in the ancient Arab world and the ancient Hindu world, etc. Became associated with Jewish people after the Rothschilds started using it when they developed their banking empire in Frankfurt in Germany and then wider afield. But again, you see in the street plan of Washington, the way it was designed from the start in the District of Columbia, District of the Dove. This is why we have British Columbia. It's why we have Columbia Pictures, why we have Columbia Broadcasting, CBS. They're all Queen Semiramis dove symbolism. And incidentally, just as an aside, look at the symbols of those organizations. The symbol of Columbia Pictures, the lady with the lighted torch. Look at Columbia Broadcasting, the eye, the all-seeing eye, which is on the screen between every program. Columbia University, symbol, lighted torch, because they are brotherhood operations. And here in the street plan of Washington, there's the Capitol building in the center there. These streets, according to the research of Talisman of the United States, are actually lined up with where the sun comes up at the winter and summer solstice. Now, when you go back to the ancient creations and mounds and structures that were created by the Phoenicians and that white race in Europe and Britain and Ireland, you find exactly the same principles. There's a massive mound at a place called New Grange in Ireland, and there's a really narrow entrance to it which goes right into the center of the mound, and in the center it opens up into a cavern. Only at the winter solstice, if it's a cloudless morning, the sun comes up in exact line with that and shoots its golden light straight the way through this little narrow passageway and lights up the whole of the central cavern. And apparently there's a 6-year waiting list to be in there at the time that happens. And again, it's just the same principles, the same knowledge applied to the street plans. This is why the political buildings, etc., and the Freemasonic temples are built on the vortex points in the grid that the old stone circles and that were built on also. Now, I'm coming back to the street plan of Washington in a second, but there's something I need to talk about before we come back. What you're looking at behind me is a place about 75 miles north of San Francisco, next to the Russian River. It's called Bohemian Grove. It's what you see behind the trees there. And Bohemian Grove has become notorious in research into not just the global manipulation politically, etc., but also into those people who are looking into satanic ritual and human sacrifice and blood drinking and all this stuff, again, which can be charted with these bloodlines from the ancient world. And behind those trees are 2,700 acres of redwood forest, Bohemian Grove, where, and again in The Biggest Secret and some of my other books, I document how people are sacrificed there, the blood drinking and stuff goes on, involving some of the most famous people in America and also from further afield, presidents and business leaders and stuff like that, the Henry Kissingers of this world and the Bushes and people like that. So here you have the entrance to it, no through road, as far as I could get before it was no further. Here is a picture taken at Bohemian Grove in 1957. The guy standing up there is called Glenn Seaborg. He helped to develop plutonium. I think he was involved in the Manhattan Project that created the bombs that were dropped on Japan, etc. But look either side of him. To his right, you have Uncle Ron, Ronnie Reagan. Back in '57, just a B-movie actor. Going to be president of the United States. What, old Ron, you must be joking. Well, he became president. On the other side of Seaborg is Tricky Dicky, Richard Nixon, who went on to become president of the United States. And it's through these organizations, these elite secret societies and groupings like Bohemian Grove, that presidents and the other people in positions of apparent power, that's the route that puts them into these positions. Not surprising. Now, here's another picture at Bohemian Grove. Just concentrate a bit on this one, because it was taken on a long, long lens. Every summer, they have a summer camp in which these elite members of this brotherhood go to Bohemian Grove to do their deeds and do their ceremonies and stuff. And they do them to the same deities that this bloodline has done, has worshipped and done their rituals to, right back into the ancient world thousands of years ago, where this story started. And what you're looking at here, staggeringly, is a group of people, some of the most famous people in America, in long gowns. Behind them there, you see a 40-foot stone owl. And there's the fire between them, next to the lake at Bohemian Grove. Now, one might wonder, understandably, why the people that run the banking, political, economic system and the media in America should be dressed in long robes doing a ceremony to a 40-foot stone owl. I think we should be told myself. So what's it all about? Again, you have to go back to see the present. Back in the ancient world, these Phoenician, Canaanite, Babylonian bloodstreams, which have merged to become the controlling force in the world, they worshipped a deity called Moloch or Molech. It was a deity that was an aspect of Nimrod, who keeps coming up everywhere, of course. And what they used to do is sacrifice children to Moloch or Molech. They put them through the fire. And in the Old Testament, you see prophets condemning the people for putting their children through the fire to Moloch or Molech. When I've talked to contacts, therapists and what have you around the world who work with satanically abused people, what those people tell them is that, again, when they're sacrificing children, the deity in the modern world today that they use to sacrifice them to is Moloch or Molech. Same seamless stream. So the question comes in relation to this: how do they symbolize Moloch or Molech, this deity to which they sacrifice children? They do it, symbolize him as an owl. That's why the owl comes up all over the place. Now, when I was looking in the street plan of Washington, this is not in Talisman of the United States, this just caught my eye as I was looking through a Washington street map. I found this around the Congress building. There's a Congress building in the middle. And just by drawing in red pen on the roads within the Congress building complex, very obviously an owl appears. You can also see an owl on the dollar bill if you can magnify it enough. It has to be magnified very, very intensely, and then you see the owl in one of the corners. But when you look at the next shot, this is not being doctored by me in any way with a red pen. This is just a shot directly from a Washington street plan. And there you see around the Congress building the owl, Moloch, the deity going back to Babylon and this whole story I've been talking about. And he's actually sitting on top of a pyramid and all-seeing owl, just like the pyramid and all-seeing eye. Because the owl and the eye symbolize the same thing, this force which controls the world through these bloodlines. Also in the street plan of Washington, you find pentagrams. Symbols are not in themselves negative. The five-pointed star, the pentagram as we call it, is not in itself negative. Just as the swastika in its original form is not negative, it was just a symbol of the sun. Other things too, probably. What the Nazis did, however, was take the swastika and turn it round to indicate the negative. It's what they call reverse symbolism in Satanism. So what they do with the pentagram, which is why it's become a satanic symbol, is to turn it upside down, so it's pointing down. Reverse symbolism. It's the same with the dove, Semiramis. To the general population, the dove equals peace, love, and all this stuff. Reverse symbolism, the dove equals death and destruction. So here we have two pentagrams in the street plan of Washington. The top one points into the Capitol building, and the one at the bottom points into the White House. And not only do they reverse the pentagram to indicate the negative, another way of doing that is to distort the pentagram so it's not in a geometrically equal pattern. Some lines are longer than others, and that's what you see here. Now, if you take the road through the middle of that White House pentagram, you might call it, and you go out the other side, very soon, just a few minutes from the White House, in a direct line with it, you find a very strange building in Washington, and it is this one. What you're looking at here is a building that looks completely out of place among the streets of Washington, the Washington environment, and that whole area. The reason is this is a particularly special building to the Brotherhood. It's got the feel of an Egyptian temple. In the middle there you see that depiction of the rising sun across the over the horizon, which is what you saw on the Washington sun chair earlier, and many other symbols of this Brotherhood are that sun coming up over the horizon or over the mountains. And on the two sides of the steps you've got their symbolic depictions of the Sphinx, etc. So what are we looking at here in this strange building just down from the White House? Well, we're looking at the Supreme Headquarters, 33rd degree Scottish Rite of Freemasonry. Because Freemasonry did not begin in the 16 and 1700s, as is claimed. That's when this strand of the Brotherhood got the name Freemasonry. What it really is a face or a mask on the one face that goes back to the ancient world. And this is where they're coming from, the ancient Egyptian Babylonian world, where these bloodlines came out of a long, long time ago. Here's another more close view of that half sun coming up. And when you see it live, as it were, when you're actually there, it's a beautiful depiction of the sun. And in the back, they've got a bust of George Washington, first Freemasonic president of the United States. This is a political building, so we're told. In fact, it's a temple to a secret society, built by the Freemasons to a specific design, Congress, the Congress building. Where did it get its name from? Capitol Hill, from a sacred place of the Roman Brotherhood going way back called Capitoline Hill. And when Madeleine Albright, high priestess of this brotherhood, became Secretary of State, and she went across on her first overseas visit to Europe, she actually went to Rome and made an official visit, what for her would have been a pilgrimage to Capitoline Hill in Rome, and that's where we get Capitol Hill from. Now, they build these buildings in specific designs. This is where you see obelisks and domes everywhere in the major cities. It's because the dome resonates and draws in female energy, and for obvious reasons, the obelisk, the phallic, draws in male energy. And so in particular places, in particular cities, in particular locations of politics or whatever, religion, you get the dome and the obelisk. So just take a look, just for a second, at that dome on a political building in Washington. And there it is again. This time, it's St. Paul's Cathedral, in the heart of the city of London, one of the epicenters, this global manipulation. And St. Paul's Cathedral was built on an ancient site of worship to the goddess Diana, and was built by Sir Christopher Wren, one of the high initiates of this secret society network, after William of Orange arrived in London to be King William III, and the whole thing epicentered in London. There is St. Paul's Cathedral. There's another view of St. Paul's Cathedral. Looks like it, but it's not. This is the Pantheon in Paris. Again, a mirror image of St. Paul's Cathedral and the Congress building, this time in the other great Brotherhood epicenter city of Paris. The obelisk, there we have the Washington Memorial, the phallic symbol of the obelisk, and this goes to again to ancient Egypt, with the story of the penis of Osiris. It was apparently lost, and Isis got another one, all that stuff they talk about. And since that time, this has become the symbol of the male energy, the male phallic. And I must say, just a brief story. These symbols are actually manifestations of thought. So what these are built to represent is what they generate in terms of energy. I was inside a massive obelisk near a place called Hebden Bridge in England. And as I was climbing the stairs, it was so big it had a stone staircase inside it, the energy around me I just felt this enormous male sexual energy, and I thought, what's going on? Especially when you get to my age, you know. And then I realized, why am I feeling this? Well, what are you walking up inside your pillock, I thought? You're walking up inside a representation of the male phallic, therefore that's the energy it generates. It's very important that we're aware of this. These are not just symbols and what have you, in a secret language alone, they generate energy. And this is why you have these in specific points in the major cities, just like the domes. So here's the Washington Monument, the biggest stone obelisk in the world, right in the center of the Washington Street Plan, down from the White House. This is what's known in London as Cleopatra's Needle. Again, like the one in Paris, it was taken from Egypt. It's an original. It was in the city of Hon or Heliopolis, the city or place of the sun, and was brought over during the reign of Queen Victoria. Again, this is on former Templar land. The Temple Bar is just across from here, where the center of the secret society network of the legal profession is based, in the former Templar land of Temple Bar. Here's, again, this 3,200-year-old obelisk in the city of Paris, from Luxor in Egypt. No accident. There's another one in Central Park, New York, I understand, as well. Here in the wholly owned Brotherhood city of Las Vegas, where they had a blank sheet of paper to start with, a blank sheet of land, they have just filled it with the symbolism of thousands of years. And here you have the big black pyramid, the casino. Again, that will be resonating energy in a certain way in that place of Las Vegas. There you have the big Sphinx, and there you have the obelisk as well. Now, one of the other things they do is that they symbolize the sun and the moon, in the sense that they put the building representing the sun, like the Arc de Triomphe, and they put next to the building what they call a reflecting pool. And the reflecting pool, this is the Lincoln Memorial in Washington here, just down from that obelisk, the reflecting pool reflects the building. In other words, the building is the sun, the water is the moon. And here's that symbolism again in Dealey Plaza this time, with the obelisk that the Freemasons put up there after Kennedy was killed. And again, it is the male phallic, the obelisk, reflected in the reflecting pool, which symbolizes the moon. They understand how these moon and sun energies can be used and manipulated, and that's one of the great areas of knowledge that has been kept from the rest of the population in the secret society network. And this goes back a very long time. Interestingly, it is this brotherhood network that created Christianity and created Islam and all the other religions, and the biggest secret documents this in great detail. They created the religions as a prison religion and to imprison the mind of the populace, but they also built the cathedrals and the main churches, and they built them on the vortex points, on their sacred points, in a certain way. Again, I mentioned St. Paul's Cathedral was built on a former site of goddess Diana worship. The goddess Diana was one of the great goddesses of the ancient world. This is Notre Dame, Our Lady Cathedral in Paris, one of the most famous cathedrals in the world, Notre Dame. Because people thought Notre Dame, Our Lady, Mother of Jesus, it was taken as a Christian name. In fact, Our Lady is Isis, Semiramis, Diana, and these other names for the deities that the Brotherhood have worshipped over the period of thousands of years we're talking about. So look at that. That's Notre Dame, built with Templar money, Knights Templar money, to sacred geometry on a sacred vortex point. Now we'll just cross the English Channel. There's Westminster Cathedral. Could be the same building. Again, built with Templar money in that same period on a great vortex point. And you've got Big Ben to the left there, the famous clock on the Houses of Parliament, and that is a massive obelisk. And the Houses of Parliament, like Congress, are built on a sacred vortex point. The political buildings are actually temples. Interestingly, this is on Notre Dame Cathedral, and these are the gargoyles. Now, when you look at gargoyles, what are they? They are depictions of reptiles, reptilian forms, often with wings. Bizarre and amazing as it may seem, and I'm the first to agree with that, this is how ancient and modern these reptilians are described in ancient texts and by people who've seen them, and again, the biggest secret documents this in enormous detail. So on the cathedrals and on the stately homes of the British and European aristocracy, you find these reptiles. You also find them on or around a modern airport, Denver Airport. Why are gargoyles in Denver Airport? A modern airport built controversially and for an enormous amount of money in more recent years. It just so happens that those that research into these things, into the extraterrestrial influence on Earth, have designated that, and has some of the people involved in its construction, as a reptilian base, an Anunnaki base, actually in Colorado. In Dealey Plaza, where they killed Kennedy, one of the buildings of Dealey Plaza has gargoyles all over it. Why? Because this is symbolic of the bloodlines and where the bloodlines actually come from and what they're controlled by. This is a depiction 5,000 years BC in the Ubaid culture, the one that just preceded Sumer in what we now call Iraq, and this was a depiction of one of their gods. And again, the reptilian, lizard-type humanoid figure, ancient and modern, keeps coming up again and again, and you can see it also in the states, in the coats of arms and the family coats of arms of these aristocratic bloodlines in Europe. Okay, another indication of how this symbolism works and where they're coming from. This is George Washington. In the last century, they decided they didn't have a decent statue of George, so instead of getting an American to produce one, they ordered it from Italy, from Florence. And when it arrived on the dockside, people were staggered, because here was George, the first president of the United States, depicted naked from the waist up, with this cloth over his Bill Clinton's, and then pointing up one arm, pointing down the other. What's going on? Unless you realize where these people are coming from, it's inexplicable. Well, if you just hold that in your mind, arm up, arm down, naked from the waist up, and then Bill Clinton's covered in a piece of cloth, well, this is where it's coming from. This is the ancient depiction of the compilation of the negative force symbol that the Templars worshipped, or the high-level Templars worshipped anyway, called Baphomet. And this is why they depicted George Washington in that way. Now, the skull and bones is a symbol you can keep picking up when you're trying to read the secret language also. The skull and bones was on the flag of the ships of the Templars, which is why it just got turned into the pirate flag in children's stories and stuff like that. And there was another organization called the Russell Group, the Russell Company, the Russell Trust, and they made a fortune. It's one of the bloodline families in America. They made a fortune running opium to China for the British during the Opium Wars, when Britain took over China by getting the population hooked on drugs, which is what's happening to the global population today, just a bigger version of it. And on the flags of the ships of the Russell Company running these drugs was the skull and crossbones. And so it's no surprise that it was the Russell Trust that created one of the most infamous secret societies in America, called the Skull and Bones Society. This is a Freemasonic apron from the last century with the skull and bones on. Why? Because the Freemasons came out of the Templars, and the Templars used the symbol of the skull and bones. In various paintings, not just the one I talked about earlier, the Leonardo da Vinci depiction of the Last Supper, but also in many others, you see the symbolism in the painting. This is one called The Ambassadors, which is in London on display. And at the bottom there, you see a very strange kind of, I don't know what it is. When you say to people, what do you think this is? They go, well, I don't know what that is. It's strange. What is it? What's he doing there? But if you look at it from a particular angle, and it has to be from a particular angle, then you start to see what that is in that painting, and it is a skull. And the skull and bones is a constant symbol through these thousands of years of this brotherhood. This is a coin from a legal fraternity in America. There's the skull and bones again. There's the owl at the top, Moloch or Molech. And these symbols keep recurring whenever you're looking at a brotherhood organization. And this is the headquarters of the Skull and Bones Society in Connecticut. It's right next to the Yale University campus. And the Skull and Bones Society, created by the Russell Trust, pulls in 15 very highly selected students every year from the bloodline families, and they go on, in terms of the ratio, in very large numbers to enter the positions of power in America, both in front of the camera and behind the scenes where the real power is. The most famous Skull and Bones member today is George Bush, former president of the United States. His father, Prescott Bush, one of the people who through the Harriman organization helped to fund Hitler, was also a Skull and Bones member. It's very much a bloodline family operation. And it's part of a deeply, deeply satanic black magic network right across the world. On the other side of that coin, by the way, just incidentally, you see the scales of justice. The scales of justice, you know that lady who kind of stands there holding the scales on the court buildings of the world and stuff? That's actually a goddess from ancient Egypt, again, called Maat, or Maat, spelled M-A-A-T, and that's what that is. It's nothing to do with justice. It's another brotherhood symbol. Again, you see them everywhere. You go in any Freemasonic temple or secret society building, and you'll find, again, the black and white squares on the floor. And this is not just Freemasonic. Again, you go back into the ancient world, you see the same thing reoccurring. The floor is black and white squares. This is a policeman from England, and I've noticed in America, you see the same thing, the black and white squares on the uniform and what have you. That is to indicate the Freemason secret society, although most policemen don't realize this. Now, this is Westminster Abbey, and the same you'll find in Notre Dame and these other so-called great cathedrals of the world. The floor is black and white squares. Why? Because the same brotherhood that uses this symbolism built the things and controls them to this very day. When you get into the transnational corporations, again, you see the symbolism, because as we'll come to as we go along in a few minutes, all these apparently unconnected areas of our lives, banking, transnational corporations, oil companies, connect into the same group, the same controlling force, and so all over the major companies of the world, banks and what have you, you see the brotherhood symbols. This is ARCO, Atlantic Richfield Oil Company, and there its symbol, the pyramid with a capstone missing, looked at from above. One of the classic symbols. Chevron. What you need to do to see the symbolism of this is to see this not as two one-dimensional ticks, but as two three-dimensional boxes, one on top of another, which is very symbolic in the secret language. One square equals we control all that is right, all that is just, all that is fair. This is where we get everyday phrases from, like a square deal or being fair and square. One square on top of another square in any form means we control all that is right and all that is wrong, all that is positive, all that is negative, all that is just, all that is unjust, all that is this, all that is that. We control everything. And so that's what that's saying. And so appropriately, when you look in the main lobby of the Houses of Parliament in Britain, you find the two squares, one laid on the other, the so-called eight-pointed star, and that says we control everything in the Brotherhood secret language. Also, as I travel the world, the number of times I see police forces have their badge in the center of two squares laid on top of each other. This is Sussex Police in Britain, but I've seen it all over the world, the same thing. Very appropriate. We control everything. One of the most important strands of this bloodline, going back to the Anunnaki of the ancient world and this hybrid race that was created, is France. And particularly an area of France and near across the German border called Lorraine, or Alsace-Lorraine. And the House of Lorraine has been a real home for the purest of these reptile Martian or reptile human bloodlines. And the House of Lorraine developed this symbol, the double cross. See that there on this guy. Double cross. That's where we get the phrase being double-crossed, being manipulated. How appropriate. And so you take the double cross, and we see it in the modern world in Exxon, the Rockefeller-controlled or guided oil company, with the double cross in the symbol. Again, to the uninitiated, people would look at that and say, oh, it's just a symbol, mate. but actually to the initiates who run this show, it actually means something. A Texaco oil company, esoteric symbols again. The circle, the pentagram, and the T-cross of Freemasonry, the Tau cross it's also called. Again, symbols are talking to the subconscious. When you look at that symbol, you can't hear words coming off it in a conscious way, but it's